Hello, Robs. We're back with another book. But of course we are. Listen, I've gone into mania mode with books and started several books, daily book entries per day. But why not? Let's do it. Let's get it done. Let's do it. This is Fowl Play, 20 Hilarious Years with the Talking Crow by Reverend Whitney Dough. Who is this man? Let's read what it says about Whitney. About the author, the Reverend Whitney Dough is currently the producer and host of Methodist Hour, a 30-minute weekly radio broadcast heard over 250 radio outlets across America. The broadcast is also beamed by the Far East Broadcasting Company to mainland Asia, where it reaches an estimated 100 million English understanding persons per week. In this work, Mr. Doe is a missionary and evangelist for the Golden Christian Gospel. He is appointed as an approved evangelist of the Florida Conference of the United Methodist Church. Methodist Hour International is a work of faith supported solely by individuals and groups who are interested in sharing the good news with the multitudes. Its address is P.O. Box 77, Orlando, Florida, 32802. Let's get on with this book. Foul Play. Hello! By Reverend Whitney Doe. Illustrations by Mary Platt. I like it, which is obviously why I'm reading it. It's copyright 1976, second printing, so others must have liked it too. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced in any form without the permission of Whitney Doe. Sorry, Whitney. Oh, look, he's got a record player. Dedicated to parakeet owners everywhere. Parakeets are becoming the rage in America. Without casting any aspersions upon the wonderful little birds, I say frankly to Americans, trade your parakeet for a crow, and your rage will know no limits. Yeah.
Hello, Andy. This is Wit.
This is Wit. So I'd say Wit.
This is Wit.
His master's voice. Preface. Andy Doe is 20 years old. Wait, this dude's 20 years old? There's no way. No, Andy must be the bird. All right, that makes more sense.
Hey, like me, like my, hey, click that like button, click the like button.
If you click that like button, I will disown you. Andy Doe is 20 years old. He's the youngest member of our family. If you were to see Andy dashing about in his one and only black suit, which he changes once a year, you would doubt that he is a blood relative of ours. You would certainly never guess that he had any connection with a Methodist preacher. In addition to sporting the dubious suit, he measures only 18 inches from stem to stern. That's quite small for a 20-year-old. Well, your suspicions would be partially justified. Although he has been very closely associated with our family, Andy is really adopted. He's not a real doe. He happens to be a real crow. Andy's history is the familiar American success story of the common bird who makes good, if you can call his perpetual prank calling making good. The character you're about to meet is an ordinary garden variety common crow. His ancestors were all wild crows. I assure you there's nothing exceptional in his family tree. Just a rickety nest near with which an occasional buzzard alights. All that Andy has learned and done has been accomplished the hard way on us. He's learned and done a lot. In spite of the fact that Andy boasts no college or seminary education, this bird is no beetle brain. He has matched wits with many humans in one. Yet, with all his brains, there's one thing Andy has not discovered. He doesn't realize he's a crow. The character considers himself human like everybody else. We just haven't had the heart to tell our family's youngest, that I'm not his brother and that Mother Doe isn't his real mama. But why should we? When you become acquainted with Andy, you'll feel the same way as we do about him. Feathers or no feathers, he's as human as most of us. Andy says he hopes you enjoy this account of his escapades. We want you to know that, strange as it seems, this is a true story. Whitney J. Doe, Anaco, Florida. Buddy stuff. The Lord bless you, Geraldine, from Whitney Doe. The salesman's spectacles. We sat on our front porch and watched the door-to-door salesman making his way toward our house. We observed him stepping buoyantly on nearby porches, ringing doorbells and rattling off a spiel as he flashed rows of white teeth. It was plain to see that his sales line was irresistible. The paraphernalia he carried revealed that the subject of his pressured talk was soap. Now, soap was the one thing we didn't need. Our shelves were sagging with soap at that very moment. How discomforting it was to notice that the neighbors seemed to capitulate quickly to this traveling prodigy. Judging by the voluminous order blanks he carried and our neighbors signing up one by one, a freight car of soap was destined to be delivered on our street. Not being people who give up easily, Mother Doe and I planned what we believed would be the best line of resistance and waited, I must confess, with some apprehension. Little did we realize what was about to happen. Who could have guessed that Andy would intervene? We detected a hopeful gleam behind his thick lens glasses as the salesman drew near. We were next. He laid a foot on our step, and our jaws dropped unanimously for the opening parry. Suddenly the man paused. A gang of children at the curb with Andy in their midst had caught his eye. Well, I declare, he exclaimed, turning back. The kids have captured a blackbird. That's no blackbird, we corrected. That's our pet crow, Andy. The salesman was highly amused. A pet crow! A pet crow!
I heard of crows being tamed. Never saw one before. How amazing.
He talks, mister, boasted little Herbie Schutz. He can say almost anything. We could see the salesman's interest growing by leaps and bounds. That freight car of soap was forgotten for the moment. He walked over to the group of children and squatted down before the crow. Hello, Andy, he beamed.
Hello,
crackled the bird, thrilled at the stranger's attention. The soap man almost lost his balance. A human-like voice had come from the crow's throat. The stranger placed a hand on the curb to steady himself and glanced suspiciously at the children. His look said, "Which one of you brats threw your voice?" Then he laughed good-humoredly, as though condescending to forgive this little deception, and reached out to touch the crow. Andy hopped away. The man waddled forward like an elderly duck and reached for the bird again. Andy was delighted at this new game and skipped nimbly beyond the salesman's fingers. We watched the stranger search his pockets for an item with which to entice Andy. He found nothing. His pencil and order blanks had been left on our porch near the top step. Suddenly, on an impulse, the man whipped off his glasses and extended them toward the crow. Then it happened. A blur marked Andy's lightning hop forward. In a twinkling, the cunning crow was soaring upward. The salesman's spectacles were dangling from his bill. This unexpected turn of events was greeted by a burst of laughter from the kids. There was no end of entertainment when Andy was around. The startled man stared blindly at the place he had last seen Andy, and then blinked rapidly. He leaped to his feet. "Well, where'd he go, children? Where are the glasses? Where are my glasses?" "There he goes," pointed the youngsters as Andy alighted on a nearby porch roof. But the children's gestures were useless. The man looked in the opposite direction. My heart sank with the realization that the roving soap man was practically blind without the use of his specs. On the other hand, perhaps it was best that he couldn't see the bright-eyed crow sitting triumphantly at the roof's edge and holding the ill-gotten prize 15 feet above a concrete walk. Unsuspectingly, our poor salesman had appealed to one of Andy's strongest and potentially most devastating weaknesses. Like a kitten or a puppy, a young crow loves to play. However, that's where the similarity ends. The similarity ends because a crow never outgrows this youthful propensity. Even as a fledgling hopping and sliding on our kitchen's linoleum floor, Andy's favorite game had been hide and seek. He insisted that we play the game his way. He would stand on a newspaper, and after I had concealed a match within its folds, he would turn the pages back, one by one, holding them with his foot, until he discovered the match. He would pounce on it immediately and scurry across the wax floor, half flying, half hopping, and sliding ridiculously. A frenzied chase was necessary if one wished to recover the match. Andy liked this game because it bolstered his ego. It proved that he could seize and retain an object a human valued. The bird was very quick. He could shift his head in a flash. I would grab for the coveted match, which he held in his bill, and find myself grasping thin air. The crow, we learned, was so selfish that he refused to surrender any object wanted by someone else. The item might be worthless, even by his own unique standard of values, but let him suspect that I wanted it, and only force or trickery could make him give it up. Our crow gloried in a contest. The fun of any sport, to his mind, was frustrating somebody. Therefore, when Andy stole an article of real value, the best policy was to ignore him, and thus prevent his guessing that I was concerned. If one was a good enough actor to foreign nonchalance, Andy would usually lose interest in his prize and abandon it. On the other hand, if one's histrionic ability was limited, a game would go on, and Andy, always out to win, probably would. I thought of all these things as we dashed to the sidewalk. If the soap salesman was to be saved from donning dark glasses, acquiring a tin cup, and begging as a blind man, every one of us must remain calm. Our only hope for regaining the glasses before they were damaged was to employ the finest strategy. In an effort to look calm, I casually surveyed the situation. One door away, Andy Dough sat at a roof's edge, displaying his newfound prize. Even from the distance, I could observe a sparkle of mischief in the bird's beady eyes. I turned to the salesman. At that moment, all hope for the use of guile vanished. The guy was about as subtle as a Mack truck. Brushing aside my apologies and ignoring an urgent request that he pretend to be happy, the man squinted at me and shrilly demanded that I order the crow to return his glasses immediately. He was plainly frantic. Meanwhile, Andy was becoming more and more pleased with the excitement his robbery had caused. The crow sensed that he had gotten this stranger into a terrible predicament. I saw him cock his head to one side and look down upon the scene with great satisfaction. A sense of helplessness came over me. Destroyed, one pair of expensive glasses. Blind, one unsuspecting salesman who had tried to tease a crow. Expecting no more response than a stone would give, I turned toward my delinquent pet and shouted desperately, "Andy, bring those glasses back here at once." "Ah!" was the crow's muffled retort. He dared not open his mouth lest the specks fall to the ground where he could grab them. Apparently, my order was absorbed like water poured on a drunk duck's back. Andy's animation approximated that. Is that supposed to be animation? Antimation approximated that of a statue as he adopted an air of innocent unconcern and sat riveted to the roof. The children and I walked to a position in front of the porch and looked up. The crow's head and the rims of the spectacles were silhouetted against the blue sky. The bird looked serenely down at our upturned faces. "Andy, if you don't come down this minute, we'll have roasted crow for dinner tomorrow," I threatened. "Ah!" The kids laughed. Andy's breast swelled with conceit, and he began to hop along the roof's edge, cutting a few additional capers for his already appreciative audience. The glasses swung perilously over the concrete. "Stop!" I yelled. "Now hold on a minute. In situations like this, a person must remain calm." Who was it that had been thinking in terms of strategy a few moments earlier? I was making a jackass of myself and trying to reason with the stubborn crow. Never enter a kicking match against a mule was a good rule. Talk was useless. I walked to the stricken soap man to announce the situation. "Mister, that bird thinks this is a game we're playing." "A game?" sputtered the man. "I'd make game of that cursed crow if I had a gun right now." Thinking to myself that the guy couldn't even see, let alone hit the broadside of a barn, I continued, "I'm afraid he won't voluntarily return your glasses." At these words, the salesman lifted a fist in Andy's general direction and began to mutter wild threats. Then he turned abruptly and groped his way across the pavement to our porch. He sat down angrily on the top step. His attitude seemed to say, "Here I camp until you people return my glasses." Mother Doe and I felt sorry for the poor man. To continue his business without his glasses was an impossibility. What would he do? Would he sit on our step until duplicates arrived in the parcel post, or should he rush him to an optometrist and get started on a new pair locally? Better not go near him yet. The man was smoldering with rage. I could hear him cursing under his breath. He was fumbling for a smoke with trembling hands. After he lit the cigarette, we saw him place the still glowing match in his pocket. Surely, there must be some way to get those glasses without their being broken, I thought. But how? Since the finer points of strategy had been eliminated, I decided to resort to more open means of deceiving the crow. Turning to one of the children, I asked, "Jimmy, how about bringing me a basin of water?" The boy was delighted to take a part in this wonderful drama. He dashed away and reappeared carefully, carrying a brimful pan of cool, clean water. We placed the basin at the curb opposite Andy and looked hopefully upward. Nothing. Listen, Train. Come on, buddy. You done, Train? Nothing happened. Normally, the crow would have been thrilled at the prospect of a frolic in a bath, but not today. Andy glared disdainfully at us. Who did we think we were kidding? Andy wasn't interested. He wouldn't come down. Well, the appeal to Andy's love for cleanliness had fallen flat. But I knew of an even stronger temptation which we might set before him. Perhaps he would forsake the psychological pleasure of frustrating the salesman for the more tangible satisfaction of a full belly. I knew Andy to be the victim of an insatiable appetite. He was consistently given to gluttony. Until now, nothing from... The strangest thing I'll give up. Where else are you going to get a reading of a book about crows with train horns? I knew Andy to be the victim of an insatiable appetite. He was consistently given to gluttony. Until now, nothing from poison to peanuts had stopped him from gobbling all available food on any occasion. Surely the crow would trade the spectacles for a delicious hamburger. Again, enlisting the aid of the children, I suggested that we bring portions of raisins, cereals, apples, and hamburger from our respective kitchens and place this food on the sidewalk in Andy's full view. Because I had requested an act of charity in behalf of the afflicted stranger, the kids responded nobly. Each made a generous contribution. In a very short while, we had a modest pile of tempting eats displayed before Andy's greedy gaze. I was pleased. The food roundup had been a tremendous success. Now the crow and the spectacles would glide quickly to the sidewalk. We stepped aside and waited with bated breath. I walked to our front step and joined the salesman in defeat. Nothing more could be done. Andy, if it appeared, had won the day. The soap man would be blind from now until the time that new glasses could be obtained. Half an hour dragged by while the stranger and I sat engulfed in despair. The excited children lingered at the scene and patiently awaited the outcome of this unusual event. I heard a few of them scolding the crow and begging him to please have mercy on the poor man and bring him his glasses back. Mercy, huh? Andy was gloating over the man's misfortune. I could see his sky glances in our direction. That bird on the roof with the glasses in his bill was most anxious to frustrate us. His possessing the object of our concern made him top man on the totem pole. He was reveling in his power over us. Suddenly I leaped up. Andy had jumped into the air and was flapping leisurely across the street. No glasses were in his mouth. He had left his prize behind on the porch roof, in the rain gutter to be exact. A wild hope raced through my mind. Had avaricious Andy relented? Now I could boost one of the kids to the roof, rescue the specs, restore the salesman's eyesight, and send him happily on his way. Oh, Andy was alighting on the lofty pinnacle of George Lupton's house, directly across the street from where he had deposited the spectacles. He was looking right down on them. So that was it. The game had gotten a little dull, and that crafty crow was attempting to stimulate some action by daring us to make a pass at the prize. One feint toward those spectacles on our part, and he would streak across the road, scoop them up, and disappear into the blue. There he sat, the villain, a little black tormentor, stark against the afternoon sky, intently watching our every move. It was still a hopeless situation for us. But here was a new opportunity to outwit Andy. We would re-employ strategy, and by Jove, we'd win this time. Sit right here and don't move, I instructed the soap man. We may get your glasses yet. What's happened? He blinked. I turned and dashed through our house to the backyard. An ivy-covered fence separated me from the back door of Eddie Moore's house. Let me explain that Eddie Moore was a lad of 16, and it was on Eddie's porch that Andy had placed the salesman's approximation of 20/20 vision. Over the fence I went with a mighty bound. Bang, bang, with perhaps too much enthusiasm. I knocked on Eddie's door. No answer. A second and more vigorous try brought no further response. What tough luck. Stalled again. Disappointment smothered my spirits and weighed my feet as I hurdled the fence and sat down again with Andy's disheartened victim. The man peered anxiously into my face and looked inquiringly at my hands as though expecting to see the lost spectacles. Patience, I muttered. It will take time, but we'll get your glasses. So help me. Where'd you go? Bursting with curiosity, the kids were crowding around us. I went to Eddie Moore's back door, but there's nobody home. Hey, kids, how about finding Eddie for us? He's probably playing ball somewhere around here. First one that finds him gets a quarter. Hooray! Whooped the youngsters and scattered in all directions. My hopes soared slightly until, one by one, the children came staggering back. Is this story going to go on forever? No. Got about 5 more pages, though. Finally, the last child returned without success. My inspired manhunt had proved completely fruitless. Rescue operations for the salesmen were bogged down again. I heaved a deep sigh and settled my soul for the long wait. For 2 solid hours, we and the crow continued our respective vigils. Our eyes turned from the unpredictable Andy to the distant corners around which might appear Mr. Moore's favorite son, and back to the crow again. The salesman, who was not capable of watching anything, alternated between staring dimly toward our neighbor's porch and hanging his head to mutter in dismay. All the while, Andy was hovering like a shadow over the scene, guarding his trophy, watching us closely, and acting pleased with himself. The shadows of late afternoon had lengthened across the street. When that long-awaited figure did appear, Eddie Moore came whistling down the pavement. A baseball bat from which dangled a battered first baseman's mitt was thrown over his shoulder. The boy's brown eyes widened in surprise as a dozen children stampeded to greet him. Each child wanted to be the first to tell the big news. Consequently, they were all shouting at once. Completely mystified. I just drove by a fucking semi. Consequently, they were all shouting at once. Completely mystified, Eddie looked from one to the other and scratched his head. A traveling salesman's glasses on his roof? Somebody's nuts, Eddie growled, and it ain't me. At that moment, I arrived to enlighten our bewildered neighbor about the events of the past few hours. Andy has done it again, Eddie. He swiped some guy's glasses. They're on your roof. The boy listened in amazement as I recited the details of our crow's latest escapade. In conclusion, I briefed him on the situation as it now stood. The glasses were in the rain gutter on the roof. The salesman was sitting in a blinded condition on our step, and Andy was hovering nearby, ready to seize those specs and possibly dash them to pieces the moment we made a stab for them. Now, Eddie, this is a delicate situation. A guy's eyesight is at stake. We'll have to work carefully and strike fast. Here's my suggestion. You sneak up to your front bedroom, creep to the window, unlatch it without Andy seeing you, throw it open suddenly, and dive as hard as you can for those glasses. In that way, we can beat Andy to the punch. Will you give it a try? Sure, grinned my friend, a sparkle in his eye. Eddie was always prepared for any contest where skill and action were involved. I'll get them glasses. Watch me outrun that bird. Eddie Moore, accompanied by several kids, stalked past the defeated salesman, filed through our house, slid secretively over the ivy-covered fence, and entered the Moore's house via a cellar window. The boy had no key for his back door. It happened that this particular window led into the coal bin, but that didn't stop our heroes. I watched the last pair of feet disappear into the blackness, then returned to the street to anxiously await our plans unfolding. My part would be to distract that eagle-eyed rascal sitting on Lupton's roof. Without so much of a glance toward the coveted spectacles, I walked over to a position almost beneath my feathered friend. He sat with the dignity of a conqueror and slowly turned his head to look down upon me. From across the street came the faint pounding of a dozen feet, hurtling up a stairway. Confound it! Why didn't they proceed more carefully? Eddie's mother was in for a big surprise when she found that trail of coal dust through her house. I shouldn't have allowed those kids to go with Eddie. Now came the crucial moment in our strategy. That mob in Eddie's bedroom must not show themselves prematurely, or all would be lost. Jeepers! I caught a fleeting movement at one of the windows. There it was again. Oh, Eddie's hand was stealing stealthily around the curtain and fumbling for the lock. Andy, I yelled, you're an old buzzard. Quiet, was the bird's response as he temporarily fixed his attention on me. The plan was working. Crash! A bedroom window across the street shut up, and a boy dived, like a tackler on a football team, out upon the black, tarred roof. Eddie's initial surge threw him off balance, and he sprawled momentarily in the sun-warmed tar. I heard the swish of Andy's wings as the bird darted like black lightning straight for the spectacles. Eddie jumped to his feet and took another dive forward. It seemed that the boy and the crow met head-on. My heart was in my throat. What if Eddie fell off the roof? What if they collided and Andy got hurt? What if the glasses were shattered? At last I could breathe again. It was all over. A bruised and tar-splotched Eddie was triumphantly holding up a pair of thick lens glasses. They were intact. The boy's hand had reached the prize a split second before the crow's beak. Andy swerved to a nearby branch where he was squawking and scolding in loud chagrin. Of course, they spelled it charging. We had done it. The soap salesman was saved. A few moments later, a grimy but happy group of young people approached the stranger with his undamaged spectacles. The man had been unable to witness Eddie's thrilling rescue, but he seemed to guess that good news was in the offing. Eddie Moore, blackened with coal dust and tar, sat 6 proud boys similarly besmirched, and yours truly, deeply relieved, stepped up to the stricken man and made the presentation. He accepted the glasses, intoning, "Thank God, thank God," and placed them on his nose. I saw him gazing happily around this way and that, gulping in the sight of a world which, thanks to Andy, had for several hours been only a blur. Then, with a start, the man's eyes focused on the dusty gang before him. I began to apologize for my pet's behavior. "Nonsense," responded the salesman, smiling weakly. "It was all my fault for teasing the bird. No permanent damage done. Forget it. Where's that crow, anyhow?" At the soap man's request, I called Andy to the sidewalk. Never subject to qualms of conscience, unabashed Andy hopped right up to the stranger and was eager to become the best of friends. Who could have blamed the soap man if he had seized the crow by the throat? The man stared long and hard at his recent tormentor. He seemed completely unnerved, almost afraid that Andy would spring at him. Instead, the bright-eyed crow burst forth with a friendly, "Hello." Without another word, the salesman turned suddenly and picked up his equipment. He nodded to me, waved to the group of fascinated kids, and walked numbly off down the street. The old buoyancy in his manner was gone, but we guessed it would return when the shock wore off. Of course, the man's pride was smarting, but he was very much the wiser for any future encounters he might have with crows. We bought no soap. Look at Andy. "I won! I won!" "Yes, you did, Andy. Yes, you did."